Ladies and gentlemen, there's a truth about human nature that many overlook. People value what they fear losing. It's not about games, manipulation, or silent treatment. It's about understanding that space and absence can create clarity in a relationship. So remember this, the secret isn't in chasing, proving, or overinvesting. It's in creating moments where your absence speaks volumes. That's when he doesn't just notice you. He appreciates you, misses you, and values you more than ever. Human beings have an interesting relationship with value. We tend to assign more importance to things that are rare, limited, or hard to access. Think about luxury items, diamonds, rare watches, exclusive events. The very fact that they're not available to everyone instantly elevates their perceived worth. We aren't necessarily responding to the physical object itself, but to the feeling of rarity and the idea that not everyone can obtain it. The same psychology applies to relationships. When someone is always available, always responding instantly, always ready to meet your needs without any delay or effort on your part, the natural human response is to stop noticing their value. Not because they have lost it, but because abundance often dulls appreciation. The mind works in such a way that it equates scarcity with importance and abundance with normalcy. Imagine you have your favorite dessert in front of you every single day. At first, you're thrilled. You can't wait to enjoy it. But over time, the novelty fades. That initial excitement you felt starts to diminish because you know it's always there, ready whenever you want it. Now contrast that with a dessert you only get to have once every few months. You look forward to it. You savor every bite. You appreciate it in a way you simply can't when it's always available. In the context of romantic relationships, this principle is incredibly powerful. When a person has to put in effort to earn your time, your attention, and your emotional investment, they naturally begin to see you as someone worth keeping. They're not just enjoying your presence, they're valuing it because it's not something they can take for granted. Scarcity is not about playing mind games or pretending to be busy when you're not. It's about genuinely living a life that is full, balanced, and not entirely centered on another person. If your days are filled with your own goals, friendships, hobbies, and passions, then your time with a romantic partner becomes something special, not something routine. This also ties into the concept of perceived value. The way others perceive you is influenced not only by what you bring to the table, but by how you present it. If you present yourself as endlessly available, the perception becomes that you have nothing else going on. But if you present yourself as someone with a full schedule who still chooses to make time for them, it frames you as someone whose time is valuable. People respect what they have to work for. Think about jobs, promotions, or even friendships. The ones that take effort to build and maintain tend to be valued far more than the ones that come easily. In romance, the same rule applies. When someone invests energy in winning you over, they create a personal stake in keeping you. The more effort they put in, the more they value the outcome. Scarcity also creates a subtle sense of curiosity and intrigue. When you're not constantly updating someone about every detail of your day, you leave space for them to wonder. When you don't always pick up on the first ring or respond within seconds, you leave them questioning what you might be doing. That slight uncertainty, when it's natural and not forced, can keep attraction alive far longer than constant accessibility ever could. This doesn't mean you should withdraw completely or act uninterested. It's about balance. Being emotionally warm and available when you're with someone is important, but so is stepping back enough that they can feel the difference when you're not around. That contrast between your presence and your absence is what allows them to truly miss you. Think about how people respond to limited time opportunities. Stores run sales with only 24 hours left. Signs, not because the product is suddenly better, but because the looming scarcity triggers urgency and desire. And relationships, when you are always on sale, always there, always free, there's no urgency to act, to invest, or to secure your place in their life. By naturally creating moments where you are not available because you're pursuing your passions, spending time with friends, or simply enjoying your own space, you allow the other person to experience that sense of scarcity. And when they feel it, they don't just see your worth intellectually, they feel it emotionally, in the same way someone feels the pull towards something they can't easily have. When most people think about showing love, they think of being present, answering messages quickly, saying yes to every request, spending as much time as possible together. On the surface, this seems logical. After all, if you care about someone, why wouldn't you want to be there for them constantly? But here's where human psychology surprises us. Sometimes the absence of something communicates its value more powerfully than constant presence ever could. This is especially true in relationships where emotions, attention, and effort are the currency that builds connection. Let's imagine a scenario. You live near a beautiful park and you walk through it every day on your way to work. At first, you admire the flowers, the fresh air, and the peacefulness. But after months of passing through, you stop noticing the details. It becomes part of the background. Still beautiful, but not something you consciously appreciate anymore. Now imagine that. For some reason, the park closes for renovations for 3 months. You can't walk through it. You have to take a different route. Suddenly you miss the park. You remember the little things you loved about it, the way the sunlight hit the leaves, the smell of the grass after rain. When the park reopens, you appreciate it far more than before. This is what emotional absence does in relationships. When you are constantly present, emotionally available every second of the day, the other person's mind can start to treat your affection as part of the background. It's still nice, but it no longer stands out. When you step back, not out of punishment, but out of balance, you create a space for that person to notice the difference. They start to remember and value the way you made them feel because they now experience what life is like without it. Emotional absence is not about disappearing or withdrawing love entirely. It's about shifting the balance so that your presence has impact. Think of it like seasoning in food. Too little and the meal is bland. Too much and it overwhelms everything. The right amount creates flavor that's memorable. The right amount of absence can be as simple as not replying instantly to every text, choosing to spend a weekend focusing on your own goals, or allowing them to have time to miss you. This sends a subconscious message. Your time and energy are valuable, and they're not something you hand out without intention. This is also tied to something deeper, emotional energy. When you pour every bit of your emotional energy into someone without pause, you can exhaust yourself, and ironically, they can become less responsive. But when you keep some of that emotional energy for yourself, investing in your personal growth, friendships, hobbies, and self-care, you not only protect your well-being, you also make your moments of connection more meaningful. Stepping back also allows the other person to contribute. In many relationships, one person becomes the primary giver of emotional effort, while the other becomes the receiver. This imbalance can lead to complacency. When you step back, you create space for the other person to step forward, to check in on you, to plan something for you, to show appreciation without being prompted. There's a psychological effect at play here called contrast bias. We notice something more when it's compared against its opposite. Warmth feels warmer after cold. Light feels brighter after dark. In relationships, your affection feels stronger and more valuable when it's contrasted with moments where you're not emotionally available. Without those contrasts, even the deepest love can start to feel ordinary. Another important aspect is that emotional absence can deepen mutual respect. When you have the courage to step back, not because you've stopped caring, but because you recognize the importance of space, you demonstrate emotional maturity. You're not trying to control the other person or their feelings. Instead, you're allowing the relationship to breathe, to reset, and to find a healthier rhythm. And here's the most counterintuitive part. Stepping back can actually strengthen emotional intimacy. That's because absence creates longing, and longing creates focus. When someone misses you, they think about you more. They recall shared moments, your unique traits, the feelings you bring into their life. These thoughts create an emotional buildup so that when you reconnect, the bond feels stronger, not weaker. Of course, there's a balance to maintain. Too much absence and the connection fades, too little and the appreciation fades. The art lies in knowing when to lean in and when to lean back. That awareness is what makes emotional absence a tool of connection, not a threat to it. One of the most powerful and attractive qualities in any relationship is self-respect. And one of the clearest ways to communicate self-respect is by having strong, healthy boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're guidelines that define how you expect to be treated and what you're willing to accept. They signal to others that you value yourself enough to protect your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. In relationships, boundaries are not just important. They are magnetic. When you know your worth, you don't allow anyone to treat you in a way that is beneath your standards. That confidence is incredibly appealing. It says, without words, I am not desperate for attention and I will not settle for less than I deserve. Men, like anyone, are naturally drawn to people who project that kind of inner certainty. Think about it. When someone respects themselves, they are not afraid to say no. They're not afraid to walk away from situations that don't serve them. They're not afraid to speak up when something feels wrong. That kind of person sends a very different message from someone who tolerates bad behavior out of fear of losing the other person. One signals strength, the other signals insecurity. And strength paired with warmth is deeply attractive. Boundaries are also a form of education in a relationship. They teach the other person how to treat you. If you never set boundaries, you're silently teaching them that they can ignore your needs without consequence. If you consistently stand by your boundaries, you're teaching them that you expect respect, honesty, and effort. People may not always like boundaries in the moment, but they do learn to respect them and they respect you more for having them. It's important to understand that boundaries are not ultimatums designed to control someone. They are simply expressions of what is acceptable for you. For example, saying, I don't feel comfortable being spoken to in that tone is not about controlling the other person's speech. It's about making it clear what you will and will not tolerate. The difference is subtle but important. Boundaries come from a place of self-respect, not manipulation. Men, especially those looking for a serious partner, tend to gravitate toward women who carry themselves with self-assurance. This isn't about arrogance or superiority. It's about knowing you are a whole person with your own identity, values, and life, and refusing to compromise those for temporary attention. When a man sees that you can stand on your own, it challenges him to rise to the occasion and meet you at your level. Boundaries also protect your emotional energy. Without them, you risk pouring yourself into a relationship at the expense of your own well-being. This can lead to burnout, resentment, and even loss of attraction, both yours and his. But when you protect your time and emotional resources, you stay energized, fulfilled, and interesting. You remain someone with a life outside of him, and that makes you all the more desirable. The absence of boundaries can actually breed disrespect. If you repeatedly allow someone to cross your limits, they begin to assume that those limits don't matter, and over time, their regard for you can diminish. On the other hand, the presence of clear boundaries often commands admiration, even if it initially frustrates the other person. It shows them that your self-worth doesn't hinge on their approval, which is a rare and magnetic quality. Having boundaries also builds trust. When you're clear about your needs and expectations, you remove the guesswork from the relationship. The other person knows where they stand and they know that you'll be honest if something's not working. This level of clarity can actually deepen intimacy because it fosters open communication rather than silent resentment. One of the most attractive dynamics in romance is mutual respect. And mutual respect can't exist without boundaries. Without them, one person inevitably ends up giving too much and the other taking too much. But when both people have clear, healthy limits, the relationship becomes balanced. Each person understands that the other's time, feelings, and values are not to be taken lightly. And here's the subtle magic. Boundaries, when paired with kindness and genuine affection, make you stand out. You're not just another person seeking validation. You're someone who validates yourself. That self-assured energy creates a natural pull. The kind that makes a man not just want to be with you, but want to be worthy of you. In the rush of modern relationships, it's easy to believe that closeness is built by constant presence. The more time you spend together, the stronger the bond, that's the common belief. And while shared moments are important, there's a hidden truth that many overlook. Sometimes space is the very thing that strengthens connection. Think about it in terms of music. A song isn't just a string of endless notes. It's the pauses in between that give rhythm and meaning. Without those pauses, the sound becomes noise. In relationships, space is the pause. It gives meaning to the moments you are together. It allows the other person to feel your absence, to notice the difference between when you're there and when you're not. That contrast is what sparks appreciation. When someone has unlimited access to you, your time, attention, affection, they can begin to see those things as a given, not a gift. And human nature has a tendency to undervalue what is always available. But when there is space, real intentional space, it forces the mind and heart to reflect on what life feels like without your presence. That gap is where appreciation begins to grow. This isn't about playing hard to get or being distant for the sake of creating drama. True, healthy space is rooted in balance. It comes from a genuine life outside of the relationship. Your career, your passions, your friendships, your personal goals. When your world is full, your time together becomes a chosen experience, not a default routine. That choice, repeated over time, reinforces your importance in the other person's life. Consider a long-distance relationship for a moment. The reason many couples in such arrangements cherish their time together so deeply is because it's limited. They know they won't see each other every day, so when they do, every moment feels precious. While you may not want the challenges of distance, you can recreate the effect of distance by ensuring that your partner doesn't have constant, unbroken access to your attention. Space also creates curiosity. When you are always in someone's orbit, they know exactly what you're doing, thinking, and feeling at all times. While that might feel reassuring at first, it can remove an element of intrigue. When you give space, when you're out living your life, pursuing your own ambitions, it leaves room for the other person to wonder about you, to think about you without the constant stream of information. That wondering builds anticipation, and anticipation builds excitement. On an emotional level, space allows for self-reflection. When you're constantly with someone, it's easy for emotions, habits, and even small annoyances to get tangled together without clarity. Time apart gives both of you a chance to see things more clearly, to remember the positive qualities you love about each other rather than being clouded by day-to-day friction. For the other person, space can trigger an important realization that your presence in their life is not guaranteed, and that it is, in fact, a privilege. It's during moments of absence that people often realize just how much someone means to them. The small things they overlooked suddenly stand out, the way you make them laugh, the comfort of your voice, the unique energy you bring into a room. These are the realizations that can only happen when there is contrast between your presence and your absence. From a psychological perspective, this is connected to the principle of independent reinforcement. When rewards are given unpredictably rather than constantly, they tend to be valued more highly. If your affection, attention, and time are always there in endless supply, they become part of the background. But when they're offered consistently yet not endlessly, when they're balanced with space, they retain their specialness. It's important to note that space isn't withdrawal. Withdrawal is a punishment. Space is a gift. It's the breathing room that keeps the relationship from feeling suffocating. It's what allows both people to grow individually while still growing together. Without it, even the healthiest connection can start to feel heavy, and appreciation can quietly fade. So when you choose to create space, you're not pushing someone away. You're actually pulling them closer. Because in the silence of your absence, they start to hear the echo of what you mean to them. And when they feel that, they don't just want you around, they need you there. In any relationship, dynamics can slowly shift without either person fully noticing. At first, things may feel balanced, both people investing equally, giving time, attention, and emotional energy in a healthy rhythm. But over time, small imbalances can creep in. One person might start giving more, chasing more, or compromising more, while the other becomes comfortable receiving without matching that effort. This shift doesn't always happen intentionally. Sometimes it's simply human nature. When we become accustomed to someone's constant presence, we subconsciously adjust our behavior. We stop putting in as much effort because we know they'll be there regardless. That's where the power of pulling back comes in. It's a reset button for the relationship. Pulling back is not about manipulation. It's not about using silence as a weapon or withholding affection to punish the other person. Instead, it's about creating enough space for both people to step back, breathe, and evaluate the connection from a fresh perspective. When you are always available, always giving, you remove the other person's opportunity to notice the imbalance. But when you step back, even slightly, it disrupts the pattern. It forces them to feel the absence of what you were bringing, the attention, the care, the effort, and it makes them reflect on whether they've been valuing it enough. From your side, pulling back also gives you perspective. When you're deeply invested, emotions can cloud judgment. You might excuse bad behavior, ignore red flags, or overlook your own needs in order to keep the peace. By creating distance, you give yourself the clarity to see the relationship more objectively. You can ask yourself important questions. Am I being appreciated as much as I appreciate them? Is this relationship adding to my happiness or draining it? Are my needs being met, or am I always the one meeting theirs? These questions are hard to answer when you're emotionally enmeshed in the day-to-day. Space makes it easier to see the truth. Pulling back can also bring the relationship back to its earlier, more exciting stages. Remember how in the beginning there was mystery? You didn't know what the other person was doing every moment of the day. You had time to think about them, to wonder, to miss them. Over-familiarity can erase that mystery, but distance reintroduces it. And with mystery comes curiosity, and with curiosity comes renewed effort. On a psychological level, this ties into the law of reciprocity. People tend to match the energy they're given. If you're constantly over-investing, the other person might unintentionally under-invest because they're accustomed to you filling all the gaps. When you pull back, you stop overcompensating, and it creates space for them to step forward and meet you halfway. Another benefit of pulling back is that it removes pressure. When someone feels like they're constantly being pursued, even with good intentions, it can sometimes make them retreat. They may feel overwhelmed or take the connection for granted. Distance releases that pressure and allows them to choose you willingly, rather than simply being swept along by your effort. It's worth noting that pulling back doesn't have to mean cutting off contact or disappearing entirely. It can be as simple as taking longer to reply because you're focusing on other priorities, politely declining an invitation because you have personal plans, spending more time with friends or on hobbies instead of centering every free moment around them. These small shifts send a quiet message. I value this relationship, but I also value myself. That balance is attractive because it shows you're not dependent on them for your happiness. In many cases, this act of stepping back can be a wake-up call for the other person. They may suddenly realize that the connection they've been taking for granted is not guaranteed. And in that realization, they might begin to put in more effort. Not because you demanded it, but because they want to. On your end, the perspective you gain can help you decide whether the relationship is worth continuing or whether it's time to walk away. Either way, pulling back gives you the power to make that decision from a place of clarity, not emotion. And perhaps the most important part, pulling back allows you to reclaim your energy. It reminds you that your attention, affection, and time are valuable resources, and you have the right to give them only to people who recognize their worth. In relationships, the idea of a detachment can sound cold or unfeeling, but that's only because many people misunderstand what it truly means. Detachment isn't about shutting down emotionally or walking away from someone you care about. It's about maintaining a healthy emotional balance, keeping your sense of self, independence, and emotional stability while still being connected to someone. The key is controlled detachment. This is the art of creating intentional moments of absence in a way that strengthens rather than weakens the connection. It's a deliberate choice to step back, to allow space, to let both people breathe without completely disconnecting. Controlled detachment works because it prevents overexposure. In the same way you can tire of even your favorite food if you eat it every day. Constant, unbroken interaction can dull excitement in a relationship. By intentionally creating space, you allow moments of presence to become more impactful. The emotional highs feel higher because they're not diluted by constant availability. But here's where the control part matters. This isn't about ghosting, ignoring someone for days, or making them feel unwanted. Those are extreme forms of absence that damage trust. Controlled detachment is subtle. It's choosing not to reply instantly to every message, not rushing to fill every silence, and not centering every decision around the other person. You're present when it matters, but you're also comfortable stepping back without fear of losing their interest. One of the most attractive traits in any person is emotional independence. It says, I enjoy you, but I don't need you to feel complete. This doesn't mean you're indifferent. It means you're whole on your own. And your relationship is an addition to your life, not the foundation of your identity. Controlled detachment communicates this effortlessly. From a psychological standpoint, this taps into the concept of self-sufficiency as attraction. People are naturally drawn to those who seem fulfilled on their own. When you have your own goals, passions, and routines, you project quiet confidence. The other person can sense that your happiness isn't solely dependent on them. And paradoxically, this makes them want to be a bigger part of your world. Controlled detachment also helps you maintain emotional clarity. When you're too emotionally entangled, it's easy to react impulsively, overanalyzing text, chasing after reassurance, or adjusting your behavior just to keep the other person close. By intentionally creating moments of absence, you give yourself the mental space to think more clearly. You can evaluate the relationship without the constant influence of their presence. This approach also subtly shifts the dynamic. If you've been the one doing most of the reaching out, planning, or initiating, controlled detachment creates room for the other person to step up. It gives them the opportunity to initiate contact, to wonder what you're doing, and to put in effort to connect with you. Over time, this restores balance and ensures that the relationship isn't one-sided. An important aspect of controlled detachment is that it's grounded in genuine activity. You're not just sitting at home pretending to be busy. You are busy because you're living your life. You're spending time with friends, pursuing your career, taking care of yourself, and enjoying your own company. This authenticity matters because people can sense when absence is a game and when it's simply a natural byproduct of a full life. There's also an emotional benefit for you. It prevents burnout. Relationships require energy, and if you're constantly giving without pause, you'll eventually feel drained. Controlled detachment allows you to recharge so that when you do connect, you can show up fully attentive, warm, and present. For the other person, these moments of absence can deepen appreciation. When they can't always predict when they'll hear from you or see you, they begin to notice and value those moments more. They start to associate your presence with something worth cherishing rather than something to take for granted. Controlled detachment isn't a tactic you use only when things are going wrong. It's a habit that can keep even the healthiest relationships fresh. It's the difference between clinging and connecting, between needing and choosing. By maintaining a balance of closeness and independence, you create a dynamic that is both stable and exciting. A connection where both people feel free, yet deeply valued. When most people hear the word detachment in the context of relationships, they'll immediately think of coldness, indifference, or walking away. But true, healthy detachment isn't about shutting someone out. It's about maintaining your emotional independence while still being engaged and connected. And when you learn how to apply it with control and intention, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for creating attraction and respect. Controlled detachment means you stay present enough to keep the bond alive, but you intentionally allow space so that your presence retains its value. You don't vanish, you don't play games, and you don't ignore someone to make them chase you. Instead, you design moments where you step back, not because you're losing interest, but because you understand that constant availability can quietly erode appreciation. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships is giving so much of themselves so quickly and so constantly that the other person no longer feels the need to earn it. When you're always emotionally available, always initiating, and always adjusting your life around someone else, you remove the mystery and the challenge that makes relationships exciting. Controlled detachment reintroduces that balance. It allows the other person to feel your presence, but also to notice your absence. The control part is what keeps this from becoming destructive. If you detach too much, you create distance that can lead to disconnection. If you never detach, you create overfamiliarity that leads to complacency. The art is in knowing when to lean in and when to lean back. You're fully engaged when you're together, but you're equally comfortable being on your own. This approach also protects your self-worth. When you maintain controlled detachment, you're not clinging to someone out of fear that they might leave. You know you can stand on your own, and that confidence is magnetic. It's not about needing someone to validate you. It's about choosing to share your time and energy because you want to, not because you have to. From a psychological standpoint, controlled detachment creates intermittent reinforcement, which is known to make people value something more. When your time, attention, and affection are consistent yet not endless, they feel more precious. The other person starts to recognize that being close to you is something to be appreciated, not taken for granted. It also shifts the dynamic of effort in the relationship. If you've been the one constantly reaching out, making plans, and holding things together, controlled detachment gives space for the other person to step forward. When you stop filling every gap, they often feel the pull to meet you in the middle, to call you first, to make time for you, to show they care without being prompted. Controlled detachment is not just about them, it's about you. It gives you the space to maintain your individuality, to nurture your personal goals, and to invest in your own growth. You become someone with a life outside of the relationship, a person who has purpose, passions, and fulfillment that don't solely rely on another individual. This independence doesn't weaken the relationship, it strengthens it, because it keeps you both from feeling trapped or drained. Another benefit is that it reduces emotional overreaction. When you're too deeply entangled, small conflicts can feel overwhelming, and you might respond out of insecurity or fear of losing the other person. Controlled detachment helps you step back and view things with clarity. You can assess whether an issue truly matters, rather than reacting impulsively because you're too close to it emotionally. When applied consistently, controlled detachment creates a rhythm in the relationship. There's closeness, warmth, and connection, but there are also natural pauses that allow both people to reflect, reset, and appreciate each other more deeply. Over time, this rhythm builds a relationship that feels alive rather than one that slowly flattens under the weight of constant interaction. The beauty of controlled detachment is that it doesn't come from a place of fear. It comes from a place of strength. You're not trying to manipulate someone into valuing you. You're simply living in a way that ensures you don't lose yourself while loving someone else. And in doing so, you naturally inspire respect, admiration, and deeper attraction. When you understand these principles, scarcity creating value, the power of emotional absence, the magnetic pull of boundaries, the role of space in building appreciation, the reset that comes from pulling back, and the art of controlled detachment, you stop approaching relationships from a place of fear and start approaching them from a place of strength. You